Thanks, guys, for showing up. And wanted to give you an update on where we are on our Jobs Now efforts. As you know, the Jobs Now program, which is funded through what is referred to as TANF ECF through the federal stimulus program, is due to expire on September 30th, just a week or so from today. That will impact potentially, in the worst case scenario, well, it will impact regardless, 4,127 families in San Francisco. And I want to repeat that, 4,127 families will be impacted by the termination of the federal stimulus. Not everyone will lose their job, however, but all of them will be impacted because their employers, be it nonprofits, private sector businesses, large and small, and the city itself, will no longer have that job subsidy. And that business, that nonprofit, the city agency will have to make a determination of whether or not they can afford to keep these individuals employed and supporting their families. I want to put it in perspective. The unemployment numbers just came out in San Francisco, and again, we're wildly outperforming every other part of the state of California, and no other urban county is doing as well. Of course, that bar is pretty high or low, depending on one's perspective. We have 44,400 people that are unemployed. This program supports 4,127. You can do the math. It's an extraordinary number of people when you consider the totality of those unemployed in this city that will be impacted by this date, September 30th of this month. The question for us is what to do. We've continued to advocate aggressively for federal extension. We've had the Speaker of the House lead the charge, and she has not once but now twice gotten the House of Representatives to support the extension. The President has said he will sign it. We have senators from this state, Boxer and Feinstein, that have been champions in the Senate. The challenge is, as everybody knows, and I mean everybody knows, you can't just get a majority of the senators to make something happen. You need 60. And for whatever reason, one party seems absolutely committed not to extend this program, which is a rather remarkable thing when you consider that potentially these 4,000 people, in the worst case scenario, and we're going to announce why we don't think that worst case scenario will take shape, will all end up on unemployment, which is $450 a week here in California, versus about a quarter of the people that we employ that are receiving $447 a week, less than an unemployment check, but actually want to continue to work, that are getting the benefit of the dignity that comes with a paycheck and are supporting our businesses that get the benefit of their hard work and increase in revenue and sales as a consequence. It is, again, beyond me that this is not being extended, or at least looks like it may not be. It's beyond me that we're not having a debate around the notion of supporting a job as opposed to supporting someone when they're unemployed. If you're going to spend the same amount of money, why wouldn't you give someone a job? If you're going to spend the same amount of money, wouldn't you give someone something that they want more than the unemployment check? And you don't have to take my word for that. We had over 1,200 people that were here at City Hall, one of the most extraordinary sights I've ever experienced as mayor. And every single person testified that they don't want to go on unemployment, even if it means a few extra bucks a week. They want the dignity that comes with work. And they want to look, and you heard the testimonials, Channel 26, I thank them. They ran all this because no one else seemed to be interested. They ran testimonials of these families and the parents saying, I go home and my kids look at me differently because I have a job. And that's what's at stake here. So this is a big deal. This should be a national debate. This should be front and center about values and ideals, what it is we're trying to do with our jobs program in this country. Everyone's preaching jobs, 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 and here we are. We're about to lose 250,000 jobs in this country, and businesses are going to lose out more than anybody else, and the economies of counties, large and small, up and down the state and around the nation, are going to be impacted by this. And guess what? Everyone goes on unemployment insurance, and we end up paying more money for less. So Nancy Pelosi, again, gets it. Most of our friends in Congress get it, and Senate leadership in the state gets it, but not everybody else across the country gets it. So we're now coming to a belief that we need to do something about it, because you know we don't always like complaining about things without coming up with solutions. So we're trying to figure out a way around this. Before I give you the exact ideas, and Trent's going to come up, and Scott Hauge, who's been extraordinarily helpful in getting us this far, explain a little bit more detail. Let me underscore a point that shouldn't be lost on anyone. 4,127 families, of which 2,536 families are either African American or Latino. I mean, this is devastating. In Bayview Hunters Point alone, there's close to 1,000 families being supported by this program, just in the 94124 zip code, just in the one zip code. This is profound. This is unemployment rates that are 2+ times greater than the San Francisco unemployment rates and state unemployment rates. This is serious stuff. That's why we are here, to underscore not only our desire to keep fighting for the extension. We're not giving up. I mean, we're doing everything in our power to get Congress to do the right thing. And it's not a lot of money. It's $2.5 billion. Now they're talking about $1.5 billion. We'll take it. And of that, only $55 million has supported the 4,000 folks we've employed. You saw something down, you know, a lot of folks criticizing some of the job creation and the stimulus. I don't know that anyone can criticize the job creation of this stimulus program. Quite the contrary. It's the greatest jobs creator of any program in the stimulus. There's simply not another stimulus program, not one. No one can point out. I promise. I've said this. I've challenged folks for a year and a half. There's not one stimulus program that creates more direct jobs for private sector employers than this. And for a lot of folks, it's less money than they receive on unemployment. So if you don't want to spend more money and you want to help small businesses, you want to help the private sector, and you actually believe the stimulus is important, as I do, this is a no-brainer. But again, it's getting caught up in the politics in D.C. So here we are, recognizing that reality may not happen. So we've gotten creative, and Trent Rhorer and his team are as creative as it gets. And we're saying, what do we do with 4,000 families that may lose their jobs? How do we incentivize the private sector and some of the nonprofits to keep people employed when they're not going to have the subsidy, and a lot of them can't afford these employees? And so we spent the last couple of months in a parallel strategy, fighting for extension and trying to come up with a creative solution where we believe we can employ roughly 1,740 folks by investing about $9 million of local money differently. I think the best approach is not job training in an environment like this, but a job itself. So we have a lot of job training money. We're going to start redirecting some of that money to actual jobs. Best training is real job itself. And we are going to move some money around. Trent will explain how all that happens. That can help support these 1,740-ish families, which is as good as we can figure out at this stage to do, which is pretty impressive. But it requires a lot of ingenuity. It's going to require potentially the Board of Supervisors to support moving a few dollars around, little general fund, not a lot. And I think it's a good solution under the circumstances. And I want to just again thank Scott and others that helped us design this. It's not perfect, but it's, I think, appropriate and prudent, and could be very, very beneficial. And I want to again just acknowledge Trent and his team for their effort, their leadership, their creativity, and their hard work, and my budget team, Greg, and others for getting us to this point of announcement and then to get the support we need at the board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Trent Rhorer, the Director of the Human Services Agency. Clearly when you're looking at a federal stimulus program that the Mayor said $55 million, we're probably going to be close to $60 million by the end of the month. We can't replicate that with local dollars. But what we really wanted to look at doing was to mitigate the job losses, particularly for placements in the public sector trainee positions, as well as individuals who are in a nonprofit, more structured transitional program. We know that those individuals will be losing their jobs at the end of the month because we simply can't sustain their wages. We've come up with a $9 million proposal that's ostensibly targeted to those individuals who are now in the public sector and again in the nonprofit transitional, and we are going to be providing a $2,500 flat subsidy to private employers who pick up these individuals who will be losing their jobs on the 30th. All of these folks have gone through pretty intensive training while they're in their placements, and also transitional training. What do I mean by that? Resume improvement, job interviewing skills, job search. We know that a lot of those folks who are placed now will find jobs on their own, but we're projecting that up to half or more will not. And so this program is first and foremost targeted to them. Again, it'll be a $2,500 flat subsidy to employers. To incentivize retention in the private sector of folks who are currently placed there, in order to be eligible for this $2,500 subsidy, employers have to keep their jobs now employees who they currently have. So many employers have one or two folks placed there. Their subsidy will end at the end of September. The vast majority of them, 82% of them, have said that these employees have improved efficiencies of their business. 72% have said they've resulted in increased sales. We anticipate that many of those individuals will stay on absent the subsidy. But to incentivize that, we said that, or the guidelines will be, to get this additional $2,500 for the new candidate, you will have to keep your existing employees and pay them out of your payroll. We've also created, with the $9 million, some opportunities for new slots, and these will be targeted to families who are currently on CalWorks, the city's Welfare to Work program, with hopes of placing them for the first time in subsidized jobs. How are we funding this, given the constraints that we're under, both the local level and the state level? Well, one of the lessons that we've learned at the Human Services Agency around the efficacy of employment training programs is that subsidized employment works. That we have placed, again, over 4,100 people, over 85% of whom have succeeded in their placement. They have job skills, they want to work, they just don't have that opportunity. And so we're looking at reorienting a lot of what we do internally, using the federal and state money that we currently have to sustain a lot of this $9 million. The remainder will be looking at general fund, again, some reallocation internally with the Human Services Agency, and we're exploring with the Mayor's Budget Office options for additional general funds. If you look at the investment of $9 million and what that will buy us and buy the San Francisco economy and frankly buy the private sector, it'll buy us 1,700 job placements, which is a pretty good return on our investment. And at the same time, we'll be helping 1,700 families who otherwise would have resorted to unemployment if they were eligible, or back to public assistance if they hadn't worked long enough to qualify for unemployment. We'll also be serving, again, non-custodial parents to the extent that they're participating in the program. These are dads who aren't living at home but who are eligible to be served. It was designed internally but with a lot of input from the private sector, and Scott helped us bounce some ideas off him and some of his colleagues in the small business community. And you know, throughout the program, I keep saying this when we have these events, but I can't thank Scott enough for his feedback and being a sounding board, not only for internal program operations and improving those, but also really on program design and what do small businesses look for in terms of supporting wages and hiring individuals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott for a few comments, and happy to answer some questions.
Thank you. I'm Scott Hauge. I'm the president of Small Business California. I also own a small business, Cal Insurance, in San Francisco. I have about 29 employees. And I can first say that I'm very disappointed in the federal government for not continuing this program. It's been an obvious success in my mind. One of the things that has been a little frustrating in trying to extend this is when we started a couple of weeks ago or so, the lack of knowledge of people who were benefiting in their state didn't understand what was going on. So you had a big education factor. And then, of course, we had the problems with the Republicans and the Just Say No. So we're going to continue to fight to get this extended. But I do want to applaud the mayor and Trent for looking at other options to help small businesses and businesses in general. I've owned my company since 1977, and I can honestly say that this is the most difficult year I've ever had. Every dollar counts. And just to clarify, you've heard the debate about small business and the tax cuts. I want to make it very clear that I'm not one of those small businesses that's making over $250,000. So every dollar counts. So this $2,500 clearly isn't going to cover the salary, but I'm able to keep my employee. I very honestly would have kept the employee anyhow, because she was such a good employee that when you get somebody good, you don't want to let them go. But as I said, every dollar counts, and this will help my business. And again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Trent.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Scott. So that's the idea. Most of this we can do internally, and there's a small portion that we'll be working with the board to get us to that $9 million mark. I think we have the authority, the executive authority, to address about $7 million of the $9 million. So we'll move forward expeditiously. We'll be prepared for October 1st, and we'll continue to fight in Congress in hope and expectation they do the right thing to support this very successful stimulus program that does exactly what everyone of all ideological stripes hoped to do, and that is create private sector jobs in an economy that desperately needs those private sector jobs. Any questions on this?
Mayor, how do you weigh saving these jobs against the loss of city jobs? I can almost hear the Board of Supervisors now, and the unions perhaps, saying, okay, you've laid off all these city workers, now you're going to use city general fund money to give subsidies to private employers.
Yeah, it's pretty de minimis. I mean, the reality at the end of the day, there weren't that many people that, I mean, and don't get me wrong, you'll find, I'm sure you'll track down someone who we did lay off who says, how can the mayor say this? But at the end of the day, there's a lot of myth versus reality about all the people that, quote unquote, were laid off. We do have the lowest workforce since 1998, but a lot of that was done through attrition savings. A lot of that was done by moving people around enterprise departments, off general fund supported departments, and being creative. But the bottom line is, the private sector is the engine of our economic growth. We need to support the private sector. Small businesses are the net job creators. If you want to grow your budget, grow the economy. If you want to have the resources to invest in people and programs in place, grow the private sector economy. And that's the spirit of this. And the spirit that labor is supported. I mean, this has not been at odds with public employee unions. They've been quite solicitous and helpful and very supportive of our efforts. And so I don't see that as a particular conflict. And I should also note that we've reduced our welfare rolls in this city with this program 20% in this economic climate. And that's a win for everyone. That actually offsets the burden on the general fund. That means we have more money to invest in other parts of our system. And I know Trent wants to amplify.
Yeah, Barbara, when we designed the public sector track, it's a public sector trainee track, and what we've seen is even the constraints on the general fund and hiring constraints, departments are still hiring some folks and filling some vacancies, and the public service trainees program is working exactly as we had hoped, in that these individuals are competing on their civil service exams, they're scoring well, and they're getting hired. The Human Services Agency has hired a number of folks right out of the public service trainee program to do casework and eligibility work, and that's really sort of the design of that. In terms of the welfare rolls, the mayor's right. Almost 1,000 families have left the CalWorks program since we started this. It's about a 350% increase when you compare the prior year in terms of number of families leaving welfare. In San Francisco, about 5,000 people are on CalWorks, and so that does represent about 20% of our caseload. Of course, we have new families coming on daily and weekly, but through this local program, we hope that many of those families will qualify for some of the new subsidy slots we're creating.
I just have one other question about just the specifics of how the program works. Is there any amount of time written into this that the employers have to guarantee that they will keep those Jobs Now workers on the payroll in order to get the $2,500?
I'm looking at my staff.
Yeah, we're working.
Tony, the time length to get this $2,500 subsidy?
First, the $2,500 subsidy is a reimbursement of wages. So, so the employer will have to pay at least $2,500 worth of wages to get that back.
So the direct answer is depending on the wage and the hours worked, that's how long the subsidy would go. But
Assume that you don't want to kind of fitter away $9 million and then find out that 2 months down the road,
but what
these
we've
people
learned,
have been
Barbara,
laid off.
what we've learned, though, Barbara, is that these employees have added value to companies, and it's an incentive to hire from this pool of candidates who we have pre-screened and who we refer to interviews to get in that job and to succeed and to contribute positively to the company. And we hope that after the $2,500 subsidy is up, they keep them. And that's what we're learning already with our current program.
And Scott, you can amplify this because you understand how difficult it is to get an employee, to train that employee, and you want to keep them on.
Yeah, that a good employee is like gold. It's probably one of the biggest challenges that a small business have is finding good employees and keeping them. But the other aspect, you hear about increase in sales and those types of things, but the biggest benefit for me is when I brought this employee on, I took some pressure off my other staff and improved employee morale within my company. And that's gone a long way in helping my agency.
But you also said you would have done this anyway without the $2,500 incentive. So is it really needed? I mean, if the good workers, and I would agree with you, it really is hard to find
Barbara,
people who
let me
do a
clarify.
good job,
The $2,500 is for new hires. It's not to keep existing employees on. It's for new. They do, but on their own dime. The $2,500 city and federal, state, and city money is going for new hires.
Oh, so the assumption is they wouldn't hire a new person unless they intended to keep that person
that's
on
exactly
for a
right.
while.
Yes. Yeah.
So is there a job training program that will end because the money's going somewhere else?
I'm sorry?
Is there a job training program that's going to end then? Because you're taking money out of that?
No. We, a lot of the, to support not only this program for wages, we also have staff. And we have placement staff, we have business account reps to recruit private business, we have caseworkers. Those are all part of the $9 million. It's not just for subsidy. And so what we're doing is reorienting them away from what they were doing before and keeping them in the jobs now type position.
So once again, we're hoping half the employees will stay employed, and then the other half that lose their employment will create this incentive and try to keep as many of them on as possibly can, up to roughly 1,740. So, again, it's patching things together in a creative way in a difficult climate. The best solution is to extend this for another year, increase the number of people that are getting the job subsidies, lower the unemployment rate, increase the amount of revenue the city generates in sales tax, payroll tax, and have more consumer spending, which drives more demand, which drives the economy and actually reduces unemployment further. But that would just be an actual application of reality versus an academic discussion about what's wrong with each party and whether or not the stimulus was good or bad, which is utterly irrelevant to the reality that exists in cities across this country. It's beyond frustrating, I got to tell you. You guys, I think we've had 3 or 4 of these press conferences, and I say I physiologically get caught up in this because I'm just mesmerized that this program that is so unbelievably successful is not being promulgated, promoted, and amplified at a time when it needs to be, when unemployment got worse in the state of California, not better. Any other questions on this? So that's the idea. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks.